Hello everybody, I'm Matt Cexwish.
And I'm Ben Komets.
And today we are bringing you something very special.
Yeah, we want to talk about our brand new signature paint set that both Matt and me released together with Jason Trace from Monument Hobbies.
Yeah, we have been working on this paint set for 1.5 years, roughly, and developing its exact specifications.
Yeah, we have really a lot of different paints for all different kinds of usages. When we wanted to put together our set, we actually thought a long time about what paints we want to put in the set, what combination would work the best, what tones we are kind of known for or associated with. So we wanted to get a combination of all that. So colors that we use a lot personally, and colors that would be a super useful tool for each and every one of you out there. But we're very happy with the result, and we want to show you today how we use the paints and how we can achieve awesome effects using our signature paint set.
These paints are actually formulated in a way that they are a little bit more satin than the usual monument paints.
The satin in this is really just a subtle touch and a subtle difference to the normal monument range. And in the combination, I think really the magic happens with having the matte normal paints, then having some tones that are slightly more satin. For example, if you want to do something like a non-metal or also a skin, it can be helpful to have that little bit of sheen in there. But we will see that also when we talk about the model. And this is also something that we might want to mention is we really played a lot with the consistencies and possibilities that we could achieve with monuments. So two of the paints are designed to be quite a bit thicker than the usual Pro Acryl range. So they're kind of filling the gap between heavy body tube paint for artists and our regular miniature wargaming paints.
In addition to the heavy body paint, we have also included two paints which we would categorize as, well, effect paints, maybe, which doesn't mean that they can exclusively be used for that. They are actually used at the very end, usually, of a painting cycle for really convincing gore effect and oil stains.
Oil stains, or if you want to get a little bit of sheen. It's a little bit like the very old Games Workshop inks that used to be around for many years. Very high in pigmentation, fantastic from the sheen and satinness, and it's a very good tool to just enrich certain areas with a slight interest of gloss.
We have picked two models, actually three, but two of them are the same. So we have this really beautiful orc warboss with the power claw. This is actually a model that has all kinds of materials. So we have bone, for example, we have a lot of teeth, we have horns, we have fur on him, we have also green orc skin.
Yeah, you have the beautiful dragon skin also. That is kind of
the scales.
So, the scales on his lung.
So we have that miniature that covers a lot of the paints that are included in the set.
Next to Matt's figure, which is more really like a classical tabletop figure, a wargaming figure from Games Workshop, and we have all these little fine elements. I wanted to do something that is kind of designated more into the showcase area. So we're working on a bust. The bust is sculpted by the fantastic Benjamin Kenter. Thanks for that. A beautiful bust of kind of like an ice queen. So I decided to take two casts of her and paint them with two different skin tones to really see the full range of skin tones that we can achieve with the advanced flesh tone. So one very dark and one very pale. We also have the beautiful armor to play a little bit around with the Dark Seaman, which I'm really super happy and proud of the name and the release of the color. I think it's a beautiful color. It has the features of Dark Sea Blue is slightly more glossy, a little bit more green, so it has a very rich nature, but when you highlight it, it really serves perfectly as a very nice neutral base tone for a steel non-metal. But we will be using it here mainly on the armor, and then later on we're using some of the other tones also here for the backdrop and creating a very rich situation. And I think together with Matt's figure, it's really cool to see how both of our sets, when you first look at them, look kind of muted and darker, more moody colors. When you get them together, you can really create something that is rich and full of life and detail.
So to sum up, we are really extremely happy that we can bring you these two sets today. And yeah, we hope that you make them your own, so to say.
It's really all about what you make with the paints, what you create with it, and we can't wait to see actually what you guys create with it. Tag us on social media that we really also can actually see, share, and enjoy what you are creating. So we won't miss that. Thanks for your support, and we can't wait to show you our paints in the video.
Alright, we're starting with the paler skin tone. For that, we're brightening up the advanced flesh tone with plenty of white. We're also painting the darker flesh tone using a combination of advanced flesh tone and a teeny tiny bit of dark burgundy as our base color. I'm using the heavy body warm white on the paler skin tone because I wanted to create a slightly warmer complexion and not end up too pale. And the heavy body titanium white from Met's set on the darker skin tone. Those paints are designed to fill the gap between the classic heavy body paint from a tube and a normal miniature paint. They work extremely well for the loaded brush technique, but work also great for all other techniques, ranging from glazing, overlayering, or even using them through the airbrush, as Vince Venturella demonstrated. We will be using the loaded brush technique to establish our highlights. We are first doing a rougher loaded brush to place our lights, before going in there to refine the result, still using the loaded brush technique and a few glazes of intermediate tones. Once we're happy with the highlights, I'm using the dark burgundy to outline and mark the areas of deepest shadow. I'm using glazes of the dark burgundy to create the first pass of shadows under the eyebrows and the cheeks. I'm also using it to create a dark base color for the lips. In the next step, I'm using a bit of the stronger, more saturated red, the transparent red from the regular Monument Hobbies paint range. And we're using that to create an intermediate, more intense red color variation around the cheeks and the nose. We're doing that to both busts. In the next step, I'm using a little bit of our dark burgundy together with black to outline the iris. After painting the pupil using pure black, I'm adding in the highlight using the pure heavy body titanium white. I always love that little wet sparkle in the eyes. It really makes the figure look alive. In the next step, we will be tackling the non-metal armor with the help of my new best friend, Dark Seaban. Dark Seaban is a fantastic starting color for non-metal steel, and this is what we'll be doing next. You can see how smoothly the color spreads out. Once we have a dry base layer, I can continue placing the highlights using again the loaded brush technique with our heavy body titanium white from Met's set. You can see how we can achieve a fantastic transition in no time. After placing the highlights, we're adding a bit of texture and detail to the armor using different intermediate shades from our palette. Alright, before finishing that armor, I decided to paint the ice crown first. We're doing that with another color of my signature set, the green oxide. This color was designed to work for things like ghostly glowing effects or green oxidation like verdigris on copper, but it also works great for crystals or in this case ice. We're first building up a strong contrast by blending between white and the green oxide. We're using a bit of sky blue from the regular Monument range to boost the saturation of the armor and enrich the complexity of our ice crown. We're working with a combination of dark seaben, green oxide, and sky blue for the crown and the necklace. We're detailing the gemstones on the armor using the very same colors, but we're introducing more reflection lines and also like a brighter contrast so that the gemstones and the beads read even more reflective than the non-metal armor. Once we're happy with the look, we can return to the armor. We're using a combination of dark burgundy and black to create a color that is fantastic as an outlining color. It will introduce a subtle cold-warm contrast to the armor and help to get a pronounced and defined look. Also, it almost appears that the bluish tint of the armor is more visible because the eye has a warm color that it can compare it to. Now that I'm happy with the bust itself, I want to also dedicate a bit of time to the backdrop and the frame of the model. We're starting with the non-metal gold frame around the model. I'm using a combination of the regular Monument Hobbies yellow together with some of the glossy petroleum brown from my signature set as a base color for the non-metal frame. This is a good opportunity to speak about the gloss. Quite a few people were worried about the different levels of gloss introduced with our new signature lines. Our goal was a paint that really works well with the existing line. If you combine the more glossy paints with the regular paints, they map down quite a bit. That slight gloss is great to deepen and enrich some of the areas on the model. You will see that even though we're starting with quite a bit of the glossy petroleum brown in the base color and even enhancing it later with pure glazes of the petroleum brown, we're not creating more than a subtle gloss that helps our non-metal to look deeper and more reflective, especially when you hold the model in your own hands. Don't get me wrong, if you use it directly out of the bottle, it is super glossy like an ink. And it's ideal to create a shiny finish on stuff like leather or the shiny wooden stock of a rifle, or what the name indicates, all kinds of stains like petroleum or oil stains. We're painting the highlights using mainly the loaded brush technique. I'm also adding textures and scratches. Something that is important when painting non-metal is that you make sure to highlight really all the upper edges that are facing in the direction of your light source. I'm doing that using a combination of our base color and going up into pure titanium white. I'm also using a slightly warmer tone to paint in the bouncing lights. Therefore, I've just added a little bit of the Monument Hobbies orange to my highlight tone. For the backdrop, I've decided to go for real metallics. Even though I rarely combine non-metal and true metallics on the same project, I found it kind of fitting for this bust, as it almost looks like, I don't know, a religious icon or a gilded Art Deco painting. And it also gives me a good opportunity to play a little bit around with the fantastic dark brown stone from that set. I'm starting with a solid layer of that, and I'm doing a wet blending on top. I'm starting with a brighter gold tone from Monument Hobbies to the top left. I'm adding the shadow tone to the lower side by wet blending the dark bronze with the dark seaben together. After painting the general color transition, I'm breaking up the surface with painted on faux cracks. As the last step, I'm using the oxide green to weather the metallic backdrop. I want to create the look of verdigris. I want the patina to look like it's been building up around the cracks where water would accumulate. I'm adding a bit of the warm white to the green oxide color to intensify it and just use it here and there on the metal backdrop. We're also introducing leaking stains of the same color. As a final touch, I'm using a bit of the petroleum brown to partially darken the areas above the cracks. You can see how the gloss helps here in that case to darken the surface but still preserve that metallic sheen of the color underneath. Alright, hope you like the result. Now let's have a look and see what Matt is doing with his orc.
Okay, to paint the base of this orc here, I applied a pretty thorough layer of brown gray. I didn't dilute it too much, and I also applied 2 layers so it would cover this whole surface here nicely. The next step would be to add a little bit bone to the brown gray and dry brush that on certain areas that are on the upper side of this base. You don't need to be too careful about it. Just make sure that there is a little bit darker surface where the orc will stand and on the lower side of the space here. Once this is dry, I took some petroleum brown and started to build this kind of more humid area up, which is down there, where some plants will also grow. So the nice thing about the petroleum brown is that it also has this natural shine to it. And although some people might be skeptic about shiny paint in general, for something like that down here, which could be puddles or like some humidity that has formed, this is actually quite ideal. The orc has this really nice looking bone energy claw. I really want to paint it a little bit differently than the horns. So I begin by applying 2 to 3 thin layers of bone mixed with a small amount of petroleum brown over the entire surface. Then I will add some ivory tone actually to this. As you can see, it's a little bit really like a back and forth, but these kind of streaks really help to define the skull and to also break down this very big surface. Add some additional details that are not there right now, and yeah, help us to make a more interesting bone texture here actually. Okay, now it's time to paint the horns and tusks. Start by covering the tusks with 2 to 3 thin layers of brown gray. You can also vary that horn effect generally and make it more yellowish or more grayish. If your lines are a little bit too thick, you can also quickly mix some brown gray and some black, and then go down these streaks again and try to split down these lines if they become too thick. As the next step, we mix some bone with the brown gray and begin to apply it in these thin line streaks that are flowing downwards, the horns. You can keep adding more and more bone and limit the streaks until you reach some pure bone. Okay, to continue, I mix some more heavy titanium white to this bone mix and apply it very, very gently on the tips of the horns and accentuate some cracks with small dots. And when this becomes too bright, I can do another glaze with the petroleum brown and dark sea band mix, so this will all be kind of equalized and fit the overall model.
paint the green orc skin, I mix a green base tone with the dark sea ben and some green. I mix it more or less in the same quantity to achieve a nice saturated green tone. And I will also use some of the advanced skin tone. I will not mix it into this, I will keep it to the side. If I mix these two tones together, it would turn out a little bit too brownish, so I will keep them separated. So the first step will be to apply that green base tone that we mixed before. Apply 2 to 3 tones of that in a medium layer consistency on the surface that should be skin. Okay, once we're done with this, I mix some heavy titanium white with the green base tone, and I start to slowly build up the layers to brighten it up where the green skin tone is. Then I add some tan flash to further enhance the impression of a whiter and different tone in these special areas. So I just apply that as a medium layer consistency and kind of try to blend these two tones, like this green and this more human flesh tone, so to say, together on the model. Then it's time to glaze some heavily diluted bold pyrrole red over areas that would receive or like would be a little bit more alive, like vivid, where the blood would flow. So areas like the ears, the cheeks, the eyes and the mouth, that will really help us to get some saturation in there and make this look more interesting and alive. The next step would be to apply some additional highlights to the areas that we have just marked down. Add a little bit of the titanium white to it, add some highlights there so it will look a little bit more visible when you look at it from a distance. Okay, with the orc skin being painted, it's time to paint also the emerald hair. For this I mix some dark emerald with dark sea ben and apply 2 thin layers to whatever should be hair. The next step would be to add some heavy titanium white and slowly layer brighter and brighter layers to the individual hair strains. You can then finish the emerald hair off by adding some final dots of nearly pure heavy titanium white with just a little bit of that emerald base mix. Once you're done with this, you can also take some of the petroleum brown and add it in the shadow areas to further tie this whole hair, so to say, together with the orc skin. Okay, this is how it should look, and we are ready to go to the next part. Take some bone and just apply it to the teeth very carefully. Try not to put it in the crevices too much. Once you are done with that, you can do some final little sparkling highlights with some pure heavy titanium white. Okay, and now we are left with the emerald scales. So for the emerald scales here, I start by wet blending some dark emerald from the top and some dark sea ben from the bottom of this scaly surface. It looks a little bit like an sort of apron, but the important thing is that actually it does look a little bit darker on the lower side and brighter on the upper side. Once we are done with this first layer, we will add a small amount of heavy warm white or like beige ivory tone mixed with the dark emerald and start applying it on some of the scales using the loaded brush technique. It's a really useful technique for parts like this, which will allow you to quickly build a transition up from the top to the bottom. Yeah, and it's something that you can just practice also not on your model but on something else, like the base, for example, to really get a hang of it. Okay, and now we add a small amount of heavy titanium white mixed with dark sea ben and apply this mix on some of the lower scales, again using the loaded brush technique. So you don't have to go over everything, but it's recommendable that some of the scales, let's say every third or so, will get a little bit different tone to the other scales. So just vary that a little bit, and that will create a really nice result. Okay, now we use some petroleum brown as a wash to tone the scales down a little bit towards the bottom. So I make sure that it floats into these recesses here and helps to build up the contrast of these individual scales a little bit better. And the shine here also helps us a lot. Yeah, so it looks a little bit like some sort of leather or something like that. It's a little bit shiny. So that's the idea here. The next part will be the battle-scarred steel, like this cleaver that the orc has with him. So to start, I apply a solid coat of dark bronze all over the parts. That should be metallic. You don't need to be too careful about this, just make sure that everything is covered, and also allow this to dry thoroughly before you go to the next step. I then mix some dark sea ben, some dark burgundy and black into a shadow tone and glaze it on the whole blade to dull the shine of the metallic parts down a little bit that we applied before. The paint will naturally pool in like these areas which are actually deeper. It will also take down this kind of shine that metallic paint naturally has. Once we're done with that, I use some silver to stipple and streak some textures onto the parts that would be most used and worn out. For example, that would be along the edge of this blade here, onto large surfaces that are also flat to break them down a little bit, and on fine details like rivets and cracks. I practice these kind of streaks, that will help us to also show the direction of the impacts and different types of damage to this blade. You can also practice that on a different part than actually your miniature. You can, for example, practice that on the backside of your thumb with which you are holding the miniature. After a while, you should actually get the hang of this kind of streaks and these lines that you can kind of pull down. It's actually a lot of fun to think about how this blade has been used and to add some details that are actually not in the surface originally. Alright, so the next step would be to apply a thin wash of dark sea ben followed by some green oxide into these crevices to simulate some oxidations. Real life oxidations are also usually running in the crevices and cracks of metallic surfaces. If you are not sure, then I recommend to use the paint a little bit more carefully and not go over everything. Less is more here really, so just add it at some parts and then allow it to dry thoroughly. Finish the effect by mixing some heavy titanium white into the green oxide mix and apply a small highlight on the tip of these oxidations using nearly pure heavy titanium white sparkles. Okay, once we're done with this, we can use some metallic medium to add the final metallic highlight on the very edges, on these rivets and the top of these cracks here. We'll use it very sparingly so you can really build up some nice detail here. To finish this blade off, you can thin down some dark crimson in a light glaze consistency, and then you can either stipple it onto the blade and then quickly wash the brush and kind of guide the paint down the blade, or you can go with the little bit more spectacular variant, which is get some paint on your brush, get very close to it with your mouth, and then just sharp lowly against the bristles to create a really nice and natural splatter effect on the blade. The dark crimson is really ideal for simulating these blood effects because it kind of dries also in a way that how blood binds and thickens after a while. And if you think that the blood should look a little bit older, you can also add some black into this mix and then do the same process actually with some darker paint. Be very careful to cover any important parts of the model where you don't want the blood effect to go on. Cover them with either your hands, your fingers, or use some masking tape. And also make sure that you don't get any paint on your clothes. So maybe paint in clothes that are disposable. Okay, now we will mix in some dark sea Ben, some dark burgundy and petroleum brown to create this kind of wash or like glaze that we will apply very carefully and highly diluted onto the whole, onto the recesses and the lower part of this skull. To finish this off, I clean the surface by mixing some bone and some heavy titanium white and add some final highlights and sparkles and like kind of additional details here and there. So for this quick here, I used some dark burgundy mixed with a little bit dark sea Ben as a base tone, applied it all over here, and I started to add a little bit heavy titanium white to lighten that up. Once this was done, I applied some washes of dark burgundy and some dark sea Ben. I think I also added some petroleum brown at some point to give a little bit more contrast to the skin and allow it to shine in the recesses. And to finish it off and to clean up the step that we have done before, I added some heavy titanium white to the dark burgundy mix and just added some small places like kind of sparkly highlights here and there, and that should already be it. Okay, so this is the finished org. With a little bit patience and experimentation, you will also be able to achieve some really convincing results. Thank you so much for listening to our signature paint set demonstration videos. It has been a lot of fun using these techniques. We are really looking forward to seeing what you will come up with on your own when you experiment with the paints and make them your own. So yeah, please share your results and tag us, Monument Hobbies, Ben Komets and Matt Cexwish, so we can also see it, and we will always make sure to leave a comment when we see something out there. It really fills us with a lot of joy seeing the signature paint sets finally being used by you guys out there. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye bye.